Hello, and welcome back to our absurdly oversized news update. The rest of these stories are all closer to home for anyone that isn't aware of what's going on. We had way too many headlines for the month of March and the beginning of April, and I'm trying to get through them all, but there is a lot going on in the world of nature and environmental news, which is great for me. A little spooky for people that actually have to live through a lot of these things, but we're just going to jump right back into it. So, a headline really close to home: nature groups warn federal funding cuts are endangering efforts to protect land and water. This was from the St. Albert Gazette. So, some of Canada's most prominent conservation groups say Ottawa is putting at risk its goals to protect nearly one-third of Canada's land and waterways, with tens of millions of dollars of funding about to run out. Canada has committed to protecting 30% of its terrestrial and coastal areas by 2030, and is only about halfway to that target by the end of 2024. In a letter sent to Prime Minister Mark Carney, the heads of 4 environmental advocacy groups said the lack of clarity on whether the funding will be renewed has created uncertainty for people working in the conservation sector. The letter was signed by the heads of the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society, World Wildlife Fund, Nature Canada, and Birds Canada. Canada cannot credibly champion sustainable development, economic resilience, and global cooperation while stepping back from one of its most visible and widely supported commitments, the letter reads. The 2026-2027 Departmental Plan for Environment and Climate Change Canada, published on Friday, lists $366 million for conservation efforts. Last year, the same document earmarked $952 million for conservation, while the previous year it was more than $1 billion. Much of the shortfall heading into 2026-2027 comes from the loss of $381 million from the sunsetting Enhanced Nature Legacy Fund, officials from Environment and Climate Change Canada told parliamentarians on the House Environment Committee last week. The fund was a promise from the 2021 federal budget to spend $2.3 billion over the next 5 years on conservation, starting at 2021-2022. Next headline. This one is a little upsetting, but BC appointed them to map old growth. Now they say the province is failing to save it. This was from CTV News. A former panel appointed by the BC government appointed to identify old-growth forests for potential protection now says they are concerned about continued logging in those same rare and irreplaceable forests. The 5 former panelists say in a document sent to BC Premier David Eby, I've never actually said his name out loud, Eby, that the proposed old-growth deferrals were meant to be an interim measure to reduce the risks of logging, allowing time for long-term planning. Instead, the BC government continues to approve logging in forests the panel identified, while long-term plans have yet to be finalized. The BC government has tasked the advisory panel with identifying old-growth ecosystems at very high or near-term risk of irreversible biodiversity loss in response to recommendations of an old-growth strategic review released in 2020. The panel then mapped 2.6 million hectares of unprotected old growth, and the government deferred logging in these areas. It appears there is a disagreement between the provincial and First Nations about which areas are priorities and which should allow logging. So, much of the land, the ownership was reverted back to local First Nations or other local groups, and those groups, I guess, have the final say for what will happen on those lands, and some of these First Nations groups are considering logging it because of the revenue it would bring in, because they don't have much else for revenue generating in rural BC, as far as I can understand. Indigenous-led trusts about to invest its first $21.6 million in conservation in Northwest Territories. This article was from the Narwhal, a great magazine as well, so I'll just give you a short rundown. Please read the full article online. But funds are being distributed to Indigenous governments with 22,565 kilometers squared of, I meant to look up the pronunciation. I believe it's Decho lands, recently added to Canada's protected areas count. The first round of investments from a $375 million fund for Indigenous-led conservation in the territory is being distributed to 21 Indigenous partner governments. The funds will support activities on 3 Decho protected areas, which cover roughly half of Decho territory and represent a region 3 times larger than Banff National Park. Funds will also support new and existing Guardians programs, which will generate steady jobs and preserve cultural knowledge that would otherwise be lost. From what I understand, part of the federal government's plan to conserve one-third of Canada's land does feature Indigenous protected areas as well, which are a relatively new concept for our country. so that'll be interesting. New Indigenous Bison seminar aims to help Prairie First Nations successfully sustain reintegration. This is from the CBC. Bison Producers of Alberta and NCIAF, or the National Circle for Indigenous Agriculture and Food, signed a Memorandum of Understanding for Collaboration and Reconciliation. Bison have been returning to several First Nations communities across the prairies for the first time in decades, and a new seminar aims to share knowledge between Indigenous and non-Indigenous producers to ensure the success of the re-implementation. The National Circle for Indigenous Agriculture and Food and Bison Producers of Alberta signed a Memorandum of Understanding last month in hopes of advancing reconciliation within the agriculture industry while fostering a national dialogue on Indigenous culture. Its aim is collaboration on education and resources between Indigenous and non-Indigenous producers. As a result, for the first time, BPA's annual conference in Red Deer at the end of February had an Indigenous component, a new pre-conference called the Indigenous Bison Seminar. The signing builds on the Federal Indigenous Prairie Bison Initiative, a 3-year, $5 million strategy. Its aim is to bring bison back to prairie Indigenous communities for food security, restoring the environment as an economic benefit, and for reasons relating to cultural identity. The seminar featured talks from Willow Lake Métis First Nation near Fort McMurray on how they prepared for their bison return and fencing, as well as on funding, safety, and more. In attendance were a variety of industry professionals. The seminar is changing things in the field already, with Lisa Nadeau of the Agricultural Research and Extension Council of Alberta there to learn what may need to change in her line of work. She is the director of the Environmental Farm Program, which she said may be something Indigenous communities need to complete in the future. For anyone that isn't familiar with the history of the prairies, we used to have giant herds of several million bison stomping around, digging up the dirt, shaping the environment, and with the loss of most of these bison, the prairies are far different now than they were back in the, say, 14 or 1500s. Alberta has something called heritage rangelands, where it is a protected environmental area that also allows cattle grazing, and it's meant to simulate what it would have been like with a large herd of bison on the land, but again, we can never perfectly replicate it, so this is a step in the right direction. Conservation groups line up against Canada's ski resort revival. This is from a website called Unofficial Networks. I cannot guarantee the accuracy of any of this information. Conservation groups are speaking out against the conversion of a partially abandoned ski resort into a 4-season destination. The public comment period for the revival of Fortress Mountain Resort has come and gone. However, the debate over its proposed size is far from over. February 27th of 2026 was the last day of public comment period for growing Fortress Mountain Resort from its decrepit state into a 4-season destination. The first phase would focus on summer business with additions such as a few gondolas, including a scenic gondola to Whiskey Ridge, zip-lining, a mountain coaster, a canyon swing, and hiking and biking trails. There would be some winter activities such as cat skiing and snowshoeing, which are currently available. Lift-served skiing is part of the second phase of development, which would feature all new lifts. One challenge skiing operations face is heavy winds, which factored into the resort's demise a few decades ago. Before the public comment period closed, various conservation groups spoke out against the plans. There are concerns that the public lands proposal is too large and poses risk to wildlife habitats. A few conservation groups even compared the proposal to an amusement park. It seems likely a legal challenge will follow and will test the validity of the All Seasons Resort Act. Continuing along the same theme, Canmore Gondola Project under review Canmore Gondola Project in review under Alberta's resort development legislation. This is also from the CBC. These parks are meant to support conservation, landscape protection manager says. A sightseeing gondola has been proposed for Canmore. There would be 3 gondola stations, viewing platforms on Lady Macdonald, and a day lodge. Stone Creek Resorts and the provincial government had released initial steps for the Silvertip Gondola project. Feedback is being accepted until May 14th, so if anybody has anything to say, you can find the link on the provincial government website. Stone Creek Resorts anticipates that the project will generate $40 million in tourism revenue. Tourism in this region exists because of the area's natural environment, and the project aims to demonstrate that the project can coexist with that landscape while contributing to Alberta's year-round global tourism economy, the statement reads. The project's footprint would be 15 hectares, and the majority would be in Bow Valley Wildland Provincial Park. It's meant to complement the Silvertip Development Plan, which allows up to 1,290 resort accommodations, no more than 750 residential units, and up to 850 employee housing units. Canmore is meant to be the home of a $1.5 billion resort village. Provincial park boundary changes for Alberta's year-round resorts raises concerns. In 2017, a proposed $1 billion project pitched a 200,000 to 300,000 square foot conference center and casino, a 1,300-room hotel, gondola, and tea house on Mount Lady MacDonald. Stone Creek Resort's statement said its plan will help create jobs, add tax revenue, and gondola visits will generate longer-term tourism revenue across Alberta. The project would be another cog in the Alberta government's tourism strategy, as it seeks to increase Alberta's annual tourism revenue to $25 billion by 2035. A key component is through the All-Season Resorts Act. Fortress Mountain, Nakiska, and Castle Mountain have all been designated. Fortress was the first to come forward with a plan, and it's reviewing the public feedback. This is a big one for anyone that cares about water rights and water use. Alberta merges its largest river basins as major update to water rules comes into effect. Lower risk water transfers, wastewater changes are also now in play. Alberta's two largest river basins have become one part of a suite of major updates to the province's water rules that came into force this week. Outlined last year as part of a broad consultation around water availability in Alberta, the Peace, Slave, and Athabasca basins, which already covered a huge swath of the northern part of the province, have been consolidated into the expansive Peace, Slave, Athabasca basin. The province at oversight will be similar to how the province recognizes the Bow, Old Man, Red Deer, and South Saskatchewan basins converging within Alberta as the South Saskatchewan River Basin. Bill 7, the Water Amendment Act, emerged from an Alberta government engagement last year with a stated goal of increasing water availability and improving the province's water management system. It was focused on updating Alberta's Water Act, which hadn't seen much revisions in more than 2 decades. The debate landed as the province was grappling with the implications of severe drought while simultaneously weighing how best to allocate its water resources as its population boomed. During that consultation, irrigation districts and municipalities often floated the idea of interbasin transfers as a solution to water availability. There has been significant pushback from conservation groups who are unsure of the environmental outcomes of transferring water between river basins, even if they eventually merge downstream. And we're going to end it on a much happier note. A new green space you can explore is in the works just outside Edmonton. A new 65-hectare conservation project east of Edmonton will store water during wet periods and release it slowly during droughts, and you'll be able to check out this new green space in the near future. The Nature Conservancy of Canada says the West Wanasan Lake Conservation Project, announced on Monday, will also protect wildlife habitat and give people a chance to explore an internationally significant region in Edmonton's backyard. The property includes wetlands and forests and sits on the Cooking Lake Moraine, one of the highest points in the region. Rain and snow that fall here are stored in the wetlands and gravelly soils, which act like giant sponges, absorbing water during storms and spring melt, and then slowly releasing it to refill local aquifers that supply nearby communities. The announcement comes on the 10th anniversary of the Beaver Hills Biosphere as a UNESCO-designated region recognized for the balance between people and nature. Conserving land and wetlands here helps keep water in the lakes, provides homes for wildlife, and supports the overall health of the landscape. Key donors and partners with the project included Synovus Energy, the Government of Canada, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and Keyera. The property is being prepared for public access, and visitors will be able to enjoy its site once preparations are complete. One of the big reasons I like living in Edmonton is because we are surrounded by swamps. I'm somewhat of an ogre myself, so I look forward to visiting West Wanasan Lake and seeing its contribution to the Beaver Hills Biosphere. So there you have it, this 2-part episode covering the best environmental headlines from the last month. And it's funny, when I started this monthly series, I was worried I would run out of things to talk about, but I already have several headlines geared up for the end of this month now. There are updates to the Antarctic krill drama already. Things are heating up there. And also, I'll be putting up my snowshoeing video from Elk Island soon, so keep your eye out for that, and until next time, adios.